Hi guys. Hey, a while back I made a video about my jig for removing and installing generator and starter pole shoe screws. And that was about a year ago, I guess. And I wanted to do another one, updates, a few things I've done just to fill in a few more gaps. So I showed you this rig I made last time, and it starts out with this cradle. Now, one thing I've done since the last video is I added a big V channel here, a piece of angle iron, just for a better grip on it. But the way this works is it just goes in my arbor press here. This is a 3-ton Dake arbor press. You don't have to have one this big. But what I do is I just remove the daisy wheel here, and then this cradle has a piece of square stock here that just a nice snug fit in the gap here in the base of the press. I'll set that in there. And then I'll take a generator body. This happens to be a Ford Model A, but it's the same for any of them really. And now this has slotted screws. The other part of the jig is this little funny looking little square thing, and it's 2 pieces of angle iron that are welded together on a steel plate. And then I've got a ball bearing in the center, and I drilled a hole through the base of the plate, and I welded this ball bearing in place, and that gives me a pivot point for the wrench. And this has a thumb screw on the side, so this just goes onto my ram like this, just locks on it. Now for removing it, if you've ever tried to do these kind of screws, you know they're extremely tight, and trying to do them just with a screwdriver is not going to happen. Some people use an impact wrench you hit with a mallet, and that works if you can keep it still and locked down so it doesn't skid out from underneath you. This rig works really well, holds everything in place nicely. But the key also is having proper fitting bits to fit the screws. Now there's a number of different types of screws that are used on these. Quite common is just a slotted screw. So I have a couple things I use. This is a 1/2-inch drive, goes on a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, and it is a Proto brand 5408A Proto bit. I ordered this online, and it works really well. Harbor Freight actually sells a set of really nice high quality, their Icon brand bits that go on a 1/2-inch drive, and there's various screwdriver bits that work really well. One of them I have here, this is a Phillips screwdriver one that occasionally I'll encounter generators that have Phillips screws in the for pole shoes, which is obviously a modern replacement for an antique generator, but this works really well for that. But also I work on a lot of Ford generators from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s and such. And a lot of these generators use Robertson screws, or they're square head screws, and they're female square. So what I've done is I make these bits, and what I do is I take old taps. Taps have all different size squares, and I find an old tap that has the proper size square to fit in the reset of these Robertson screws. And then I will cut them off, and I weld them into an old socket. So I've got actually 3 sizes. That's kind of a large one. There's kind of a medium-sized one, and then there's even a smaller one. So I've encountered 3 different sizes of these square head screws. So I've had to make one for each size. But once they're made, they're good to go, and they work really good. So between the 3 squares, I've got a couple different flat blade tips, and the Phillips one, I've pretty much got everything covered. But the way this works, I'm going to put, this has got slotted screws in it, so I'm going to just show you. These are already in here tight. So what I just use is a sliding breaker bar, and you notice it's got a little hole in the center, and that's what pivots on the ball bearing there. So I put this in it like this, and I'm going to get this lined up underneath it. Get the screw slot in, get it in the screw slot, and then I lower the ram down onto it, make sure everything's lined up, put a little downward pressure. That's the key, is downward pressure, so it can't come out of the blade can't come out of the screw. And then with it down, pressing down, I can turn it and break that screw loose, just like that. And that's the key to getting them out, is having it solidly mounted, the bit straight up and down, not cocked the side where it can't slip out, and properly fitting to the screw. Now when we're putting these back in, when putting pole shoes and field coils back into a generator, it's tough to get them in perfectly lined up and seated properly inside the case. And I've worked on a lot of generators, and I've seen some armatures where people have either will grind the inside of the pole shoes because they can't get them tight, or this is an example of an armature that I took apart a generator and someone had actually ground the outside of the armature, ground it on a grinder to try and fit it in, which of course ruins the armature. The clearance is really tight. There's generally only about 10 thousandths of an inch clearance, 10 to 15 thousandths of an inch clearance between the armature and the pole shoes. So they have to be seated properly. They have to be perfectly parallel, and for this all to work. So one of the tricks to putting them back in is I'll just go ahead and set get the shoes and the pole shoes in place and start the screws, get them in loose. But a really great tool that helps is one of these expanding mandrels. Now these are available at Harbor Freight, and they're actually for they're tailpipe expanders for expanding at tailpipes. And so they're made for expanding sheet metal, but they work great for expanding the shoes and seating the field coils. So the field coils are new; they still have to be formed a little bit to the shape of the body, or if they've been rewrapped, whatever. Sometimes and otherwise, without this, you're only using the screw to pull everything tight, and that just makes it that much harder. So I use one of these things. So when I'm putting them back in, the screws are loose now. I've just loosened this one. So what I would do is I would put this in here, slip it inside. And by the way, these come in 2 different sizes at Harbor Freight, so make sure you get the size range that fits whatever generators you're working on. And then just tighten it up by hand. And I always wiggle them a little side to side just to make sure that the pole shoes are seated properly in the case. And then with a 3/4 inch wrench, I will tighten this up. And by tightening it up, it is pressing the pole shoes out against the case tight, forming the field coils and getting it snug right up there. So now the screw can be tightened, and the screw's not being used to pull everything tight. You're just tightening up the shoe. So I'm going to put some pressure on it here now, tighten it back up, pull that across, and get it just snug. There we go. It's tight. So now I can back it off, and I can take the mandrel out now, loosen that up, it comes out, and now the pole shoes, field coils are seated properly inside the case. The screws are nice and tight. The screw heads aren't boogered up because I used a properly fitting bit. So I also wanted to give you this quick overview showing you how I do it, how this rig that I put together works. It's pretty easy to make. If you've got an arbor press, you can do this with a hydraulic press if you have it, although I find the arbor press is really handy. So like I say, it's just 2 parts really. It's just this little square piece that I made with a ball bearing on the end that holds the wrench, and then the cradle that holds the generator case. And that's it. So I hope you find this helpful. I hope this builds on the earlier video I did and explains a little bit more. But I find this works really good for me. I have not encountered a set of pole shoes that I couldn't get out using this. It works really well. So hope you find this helpful. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Please like the video, subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this, and I'll have more coming later. Thanks. Bye.